The first thing Tom noticed was the ring. Not the flowers, not the cameras, not the hundreds of guests dressed in designer clothes, not even the enormous white staircase covered with roses. The ring. It caught the sunlight for only a second, but that second was enough. Tom Holland stood completely still in front of the television. On the screen, Zendaya was walking toward the altar. She looked calm, beautiful, confident, and happier than he had ever seen her. Tom swallowed hard. For years he had imagined moments like this. But somewhere inside those imaginary moments, he had always assumed he would be standing beside her. Today, he wasn't. Today, somebody else was. Tom reached for the remote and lowered the volume. The room suddenly became almost silent. He could still see the ceremony. Zendaya reached the altar. Her future husband smiled. She smiled back, and Tom looked away. He had promised himself he wouldn't be jealous. He had promised himself he would be mature. He had promised himself that if Zendaya ever found happiness with someone else, he would be the first person to celebrate her. But promises were easy when the moment existed only in his imagination. This moment was real. Or at least, it felt real. Tom walked toward the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator. He stared inside. He wasn't hungry. He closed it. Then he opened it again. He laughed quietly at himself. What am I doing? He shut the door. His phone buzzed. One message, then another, then another. Social media was exploding. Zendaya's wedding, Zendaya's big day. Fans react. Hollywood star, marries. Tom didn't need to read the headlines. He already knew. He had known for weeks. Still, seeing it everywhere made something inside him tighten. He picked up his phone. There were dozens of notifications. Some friends had sent congratulations. Some people had sent questions. And some had simply written, "Are you okay?" Tom stared at that sentence. It was the simplest question, and somehow the hardest one. He typed, "I'm fine." He looked at it, deleted it, typed, "I'm happy for her," deleted it again. Finally, he put the phone down. He didn't know what he felt. Jealousy was part of it. Sadness was another part. But underneath everything was something more painful. Regret. Tom sat on the edge of the sofa, and suddenly he remembered the beginning. Years earlier. Before the headlines. Before the rumors. Before millions of people knew their names as a pair. There had only been two young actors meeting on a movie set. Tom remembered the first time Zendaya walked into the room. She didn't enter like someone trying to impress everyone. She simply walked in, calmed or focused. Confident. Tom had been nervous. He tried not to show it. He failed. Zendaya noticed. She smiled. "Are you nervous?" Tom laughed. "No." She raised an eyebrow. "You definitely are." That was the beginning. At least that's how Tom remembered it. They became friends. Then close friends. They laughed between takes. They helped each other through long filming days. They talked about their families, their careers, their dreams, their fears. There were moments when Tom wondered whether their friendship was becoming something more, but he never said anything. Maybe he was afraid. Maybe he believed there would always be another day, another opportunity, another conversation. And perhaps that was his biggest mistake. He waited. Time passed. Their careers grew. Their lives changed. The world began watching them. Fans noticed their chemistry. Photographers noticed their closeness. Rumors started. Tom and Zendaya, Zendaya and Tom. Were they together? Were they secretly dating? Were they just friends? The questions became endless. Tom learned to ignore them. Zendaya did too. But behind the cameras, their friendship remained important. They were there for each other. At least, that's what Tom believed. Then came the day everything changed. Zendaya told him she was seeing someone. Tom remembered the conversation. They were sitting together after an event. Zendaya seemed nervous. Tom noticed immediately. What happened? She smiled. Nothing bad. Then why do you look like you're about to tell me something terrible? She laughed. Because I don't know how you're going to react. Tom smiled. Now I'm worried. Zendaya looked down. I've met someone. Tom's smile disappeared for just a moment, but he recovered quickly. Oh. Zendaya watched him. That's it. Tom forced a laugh. What do you want me to say? I don't know. He looked at her. Are you happy? She smiled. Yes. Tom nodded. Then I'm happy for you. He meant it. At least he tried to. But later that night, when he was alone, he realized something. He had been hoping for something that Zendaya had never promised him. A future, a possibility, a chance. He had built an entire story inside his head without ever asking her whether she wanted to be part of it. Now that story was disappearing. Tom didn't interfere. He didn't confess his feelings. He didn't try to break them apart. He simply stepped back. He became quieter, more distant. Zendaya noticed. Of course she noticed. She always noticed when something was wrong. One evening, she asked him directly, "Did I do something?" Tom shook his head. No. Then why are you acting differently? He looked at her. Because he couldn't tell her the truth. Because the truth might change everything. Because he was afraid of losing even the friendship they still had. So he said, I'm just busy. Zendaya didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Life moved forward. Her relationship became more serious. Tom focused on his own career. They still spoke, still supported each other, still cared. But something had changed, and Tom knew it. Years later, the wedding invitation arrived. Tom held it in his hands for almost a minute. He knew he had to go. He couldn't imagine not going. She was his friend, someone who had been part of one of the most important chapters of his life. He would be there, even if it hurt, even if every smile required an effort, even if part of him wanted to disappear. The wedding day arrived, and now he was watching it on television. The ceremony was almost over. Zendaya and her husband stood together. The officiant smiled. The guests applauded. Zendaya looked toward the crowd. For one brief second, her eyes seemed to find the camera. Tom wondered whether she was thinking about him. Then he immediately stopped himself. Don't do that, he whispered. Don't make this about you. He turned off the television. Silence. He walked toward the window. Outside, the city continued as if nothing had happened. Cars moved. People walked. Lights flashed. Somewhere, music played. The world didn't stop because Tom Holland was heartbroken. And maybe that was the lesson. Life continued, whether he was ready or not. His phone buzzed again. This time it was his brother. Hey, you okay? Tom smiled. Yeah. You sure? Tom looked outside. No. There was silence. His brother didn't ask more questions. Sometimes people who know you best don't need explanations. Tom sat down. I thought I'd be okay. You don't have to be. Tom looked at the floor. I should be happy for her. You can be happy for someone and still feel hurt. That sentence stayed with him. Maybe jealousy didn't make him a bad person. Maybe sadness didn't mean he wanted Zendaya to be unhappy. Maybe he simply had to accept that some feelings could exist without being acted upon. Tom nodded slowly. Yeah, his brother said. Give yourself time. Tom ended the call. For the first time that day, he took a deep breath. Then he opened his phone. He found Zendaya's contact. His thumb hovered over the message icon. He wanted to congratulate her personally, not through a public post, not through a comment, Just a private message. He typed, "Congratulations. I'm genuinely happy for you." He stared at the sentence, then pressed send. Minutes passed. No response. Tom placed the phone on the table. He tried to distract himself. He turned on music. It didn't work. He opened a movie. He couldn't concentrate. He checked his phone. Nothing. Then nearly an hour later, the screen lit up. Zendaya had replied, "Thank you. I really appreciate that." Tom read it. Then another message appeared. "I hope you're okay." Tom closed his eyes. There it was again. The question he couldn't escape. "Are you okay?" he typed. "I'll be okay." Zendaya responded, "I know you will." Tom smiled. For some reason, that hurt even more. Because she knew him, she believed in him, and perhaps that was exactly why he had to let her go. The wedding reception continued late into the night. Music, dancing, laughter, photos, celebration. Tom wasn't there. He had chosen not to attend the reception. Not because he hated Zendaya, not because he wanted revenge, but because he knew himself. He needed distance. He needed to breathe. He needed to understand what his life looked like, without the possibility he had secretly carried for years. Meanwhile, Zendaya danced with her husband. She looked happy. Tom eventually saw one photograph online. He stared at it for several seconds. Then he smiled. It was genuine this time. She really is happy. And that was the moment something changed. He didn't stop caring. He didn't suddenly forget everything, but he stopped fighting reality. The next morning, Tom woke up early. For the first time in weeks, he didn't immediately check social media. Instead, he made coffee. He sat outside. The morning air was quiet. He thought about the past. He thought about Zendaya. He thought about all the things he never said. Then he realized something. Not every love story ends with two people together. Some stories end with gratitude. Some end with acceptance. Some end with two people walking in different directions, while still wishing each other well. Tom took another sip of coffee. His phone buzzed. A message from Zendaya. "How are you today?" Tom smiled. This time, he answered honestly. "Better," she replied. "Good, then, I'm glad." Tom looked at the message. For the first time, he didn't feel jealous. He felt peaceful. Or at least, he was beginning to. Months passed. The headlines eventually faded. People found new stories, new rumors, new celebrities, new controversies. Zendaya continued her career. Tom continued his. They rarely appeared together.
3 months had passed since the wedding. For most people, the story was already old news. The photographs had disappeared from the front pages. The endless social media discussions had slowed down. The headlines that once dominated entertainment feeds had been replaced by new stories. But for Tom, the wedding still existed in his mind. Not every day, not every hour, but sometimes, unexpectedly. A song would remind him of an old conversation. A familiar location would bring back a memory. A photograph would appear online. And for a few seconds, he would feel that strange ache again. He had learned to live with it. At least, that was what he told himself. Then one morning, something happened that he wasn't expecting. His phone rang. The name on the screen was Zendaya. Tom stared at it. He hadn't spoken to her directly for several weeks. They had exchanged a few short messages after the wedding, but nothing more. Tom considered letting the call go to voicemail. Then he answered. "Hey." There was a short silence. "Hi, Tom." Her voice sounded different. Not sad, not excited, just thoughtful. Tom sat down. "Everything okay?" "I wanted to talk to you." Those words immediately made him nervous. About what? About us. Tom looked toward the window. He had spent months trying to accept that their relationship had changed. Now, hearing those words brought everything back. What about us? Zendaya took a breath. I know things have been strange. Tom didn't answer. She continued. After the wedding, I knew you needed space. Tom smiled slightly. I did. I didn't want to pressure you. You didn't. Another silence. Then Zendaya said something Tom wasn't prepared for. I miss my friend. Tom closed his eyes. That sentence was simple, but it hit harder than anything else she could have said. I miss you too, he admitted. Then why haven't you called? Tom laughed softly. Because I didn't know if I should. Why? Because your life changed. Zendaya was quiet. My life changed, she said. But that doesn't mean everyone from my past has to disappear. Tom didn't know what to say. For months, he had been telling himself that distance was necessary. Now Zendaya was telling him that perhaps he had gone too far. I didn't want to make things uncomfortable for you, Tom said. You didn't. I didn't want your husband to misunderstand. Zendaya paused. He knows you're important to me. Tom looked down. Important? Yes. That word stayed in the air. Tom had spent years wondering what he meant to Zendaya. Friend, co-star, confidant, maybe something more. But he had never known. And now, after everything, she was still calling him important. Tom? Yeah? Are you there? I'm here. I want us to be friends again. Tom smiled. I'd like that. And just like that, the conversation ended. There was no dramatic confession, no shocking revelation, no secret romance. Just two people deciding that the past didn't have to destroy their friendship. But Tom didn't realize that the phone call was only the beginning. A week later, they met for coffee. It was the first time they had sat together privately since the wedding. Tom arrived early. He ordered coffee. He checked his phone. Then he looked toward the entrance. A few minutes later, Zendaya walked in. She smiled when she saw him. Tom stood. Hi. Hi. They hugged. For a moment, it felt exactly like old times. Then they sat down. How have you been? Busy. That's your favorite answer. Tom laughed. And you're still asking too many questions. Some things never change. They both smiled. The conversation was surprisingly easy. They talked about work, movies, travel, friends, old memories. For almost an hour, Tom forgot about the wedding. He forgot about the ring. He forgot about the jealousy. He simply enjoyed talking to his friend again. Then Zendaya asked, Can I ask you something? Tom immediately knew the question would matter. Sure. Were you angry with me? Tom looked at her. No. Not even a little? He thought about it. I wasn't angry with you. Then what were you feeling? Tom looked down at his coffee. He could have lied. He could have said nothing. But perhaps enough time had passed. I was jealous. Zendaya became quiet. Tom continued. I didn't want to be, but I was. She nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. I didn't want you to think I wasn't happy for you. I never thought that. I was happy for you. I know. But I was also hurting. Zendaya looked at him. Why? Tom took a breath. Because sometimes you don't realize how much something means to you until you know you can't have it. Zendaya didn't respond immediately. The words were heavy. Tom wasn't confessing his love, but he wasn't hiding it either. Finally, Zendaya said, I wish you had told me. Tom looked surprised. Would it have changed anything? I don't know. That's exactly why I didn't. She smiled sadly. You always overthink everything. Tom laughed. That's true. For a moment, they both smiled. Then Zendaya became serious. I don't want you to feel like you lost me. Tom looked at her. You didn't. I did in some way. No. Tom, you didn't lose me. She smiled. Then promise me something. What? Don't disappear again. Tom nodded. I promise. Outside the cafe, cameras were waiting. Neither of them knew it. As they walked outside together, photographers immediately recognized them. Flash, flash, flash. Tom and Zendaya stopped. For a second, they looked at each other. Then they smiled. The photograph spread across the internet within hours. People immediately began speculating. Some claimed they were secretly back together. Others said the wedding had ended. Some insisted there was a hidden story. None of those claims were true in this fictional story. But the internet didn't care about the truth. It cared about the mystery. Tom saw the headlines that night. He shook his head. Here we go again. Zendaya called him. You've seen it? Unfortunately, she laughed. What do you think? I think people need hobbies. She laughed again. For the first time in months, Tom felt normal. But then something unexpected happened. A few days later, Tom received an invitation to an exclusive Hollywood event. Zendaya would be there. Her husband would also be there. Tom almost declined. Then he remembered his promise. Don't disappear again. So he went. The event was enormous. Actors, directors, producers, musicians, photographers. Everyone was dressed perfectly. Tom entered the room. He looked around. Then he saw Zendaya. She was standing beside her husband. Tom smiled. He walked over. Hey. Zendaya smiled immediately. You came. I said I would. Her husband shook Tom's hand. Good to see you. You too. Everything seemed normal, until another celebrity walked over. A young actress began talking to Tom. She was friendly, funny, confident. They talked for several minutes. Tom laughed. Across the room, Zendaya noticed. She didn't say anything, but she watched. Tom didn't notice her reaction. The conversation continued. Then the actress touched Tom's arm while laughing. Again, nothing unusual. But Zendaya looked away. Her husband noticed. Everything okay? She smiled. Of course. But something had changed. Not jealousy, exactly. Maybe something closer to realization. She had spent months believing Tom was the one struggling to move forward. Now she was watching him do exactly that, and strangely, it bothered her. Later that evening, Zendaya found Tom alone near the balcony. You seem happy. Tom smiled. I am. Good. She looked toward the city. Who was she? Tom laughed. Who? The actress. Tom raised an eyebrow. Are you asking me? I was just curious. Why? Zendaya smiled. No reason. Tom looked at her. Are you jealous? Zendaya immediately laughed. Absolutely not. Tom smiled. Sure, she shook her head. Don't start. I didn't start anything. They both laughed, but beneath the laughter was a strange tension. Neither wanted to acknowledge it. Neither wanted to ask what it meant, because they both knew the answer might be complicated. Tom eventually said, You know what? What? I think we're finally okay. Zendaya looked at him. I think so too. He smiled. That's a good thing. Yes. They stood silently. The city lights glittered below. For a moment, they were simply Tom and Zendaya again. No cameras, no headlines, no rumors, no expectations, just two friends. Then Zendaya said, I really am happy for you. Tom looked at her. For what? For moving forward. Tom smiled. I'm trying. You deserve it. So do you. She nodded. I know. Then they returned to the party. Neither of them knew that the evening would become another chapter in their complicated story. Because sometimes closure doesn't happen in one conversation. Sometimes it takes months. sometimes years. And sometimes, just when you think you have finally moved on, one unexpected moment brings everything back. Tom didn't know what the future held. Zendaya didn't either. But one thing had changed. They were no longer running away from their past. They were finally learning how to live with it, and maybe that was enough, for now.
Publicly, but whenever their paths crossed, there was no bitterness, there was respect. One afternoon, they unexpectedly met at an industry event. Tom saw Zendaya across the room. For a moment, everything became quiet. He remembered the wedding, the ring, the ceremony, the feeling of losing. Something he had never officially possessed. Then, Zendaya smiled. Tom smiled back. She walked over. Hi. They hugged. It was simple. Normal. Almost like old times. How have you been? Good. Really good. Zendaya smiled. I'm glad. Tom looked at her. There was no jealousy in his eyes anymore. Only warmth. You look happy. I am. Tom nodded. That's good. She studied his face. You really are okay? Tom smiled. Yes. And this time, he meant it. They talked. For a few minutes, nothing dramatic happened. No confession. No argument. No secret revelation. Just two people who had once been incredibly important to each other standing in the same room. Before they separated, Zendaya said, "Take care of yourself." Tom, he smiled. You too. She walked away. Tom watched her for a moment. Then he turned around. And continued walking in the opposite direction. That was the real ending. Not the wedding, not the jealousy, not the heartbreak. The ending was acceptance. Tom had spent years believing that losing Zendaya meant losing a part of himself, but he eventually realized something. She had never been responsible for completing his life. She had simply been part of it. A beautiful part. An unforgettable part. But not the whole story. His story continued. And maybe someday he would meet someone who made him feel the same excitement, the same peace, the same sense of possibility. Someone who would choose him. Someone he wouldn't have to silently hope for. Until then, he had work to do. Life to live. And memories to appreciate. As for Zendaya, she continued forward too. Her wedding became another chapter in her life. New beginning. A different future. And although millions of people would continue to speculate about her past, she knew the truth. Some people are meant to stay forever. Others are meant to teach you something. And some are meant to become beautiful memories. Tom finally understood that he didn't need to hate the past. He didn't need to rewrite it. He didn't need to pretend it never mattered. He simply needed to accept it, because sometimes the strongest form of love is not holding on. Sometimes it's letting go. And somewhere in the quiet space between heartbreak and healing, Tom finally found peace. He looked at the city lights that evening and smiled. Zendaya was happy. And now, finally, he could be happy too.